What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Entertain Mix podcast. It is just Will today. As you can see with my banner in the background and me wearing my Chicago Bulls sweater, we're talking basketball, specifically the NBA All-Star weekend that just wrapped up. I have a lot of thoughts, so I'm just going to get into it. I hated it. I hated it. This, I gotta say, it's no secret that the NBA All-Star weekend has been struggling for a long time. The skills competition and the dunk contest are pretty much dead. And the game itself, with all of the stars, has been leaving us wanting for a long time. So, one of the things that they did this year was introduce a new format, and it involved using some of the rising and young stars to play a team of current stars, and then the OGs played as well against some of the international rising stars or something like that. And then after the little tournament style, it ended up being the current stars versus the OGs. The format felt like it could work, but after watching it, there were a ton of issues. And my main issue that I feel like I need to just start off with is the league deserves just as much blame, or at least close to the amount of blame that the players have been getting for the lackluster NBA All-Star game. The players have not cared for a long time. They don't really play defense. It's just threes, dunks, and alley-oops, which is cool to see, but you want to see a little bit more defense. And the players just haven't cared. That is why the NBA felt the need to change the format, bring in these rising stars, add a little bit more competition to it. But having watched the actual game, the NBA filled what could have been a cool tournament with so many gimmicks and sideshows that it was unwatchable. We actually had three games for a total of 33 minutes of actual basketball. Two of the games were 10 plus minutes, and then the third game I think was 12 minutes. Like, we had 33 minutes of basketball and then 2.5 hours of just sideshow gimmicks. Obviously the advertisements are going to happen, but once the commercials are over, you need to get back to basketball. Instead, they had Kevin Hart be the focal point of the entire weekend. um, I don't get it. And I don't know if Kevin had been drinking or what, but in 2025, we were still running with the Kevin Hart is short gimmick, and that got really old. I feel like the league felt they needed someone to kind of carry the show rather than just the TNT crew to like guide it, which fine. And you could have brought Kevin Hart in as a fan of the game to just sit and talk and jokes here and there with Shaq and Kenny. But instead, you got a Kevin Hart that decided to be the main character. Nobody could take anything seriously. Things ran long. It was weirdly awkward. And then he also was playing the I'm a short guy and we're gonna make fun of that for 2.5 hours. And that was the gimmick. It just made no sense. And then, the TNT crew is leaving, like the contract ended. It's been a lot of drama, but the inside the NBA crew has been around for 20, 30, maybe 40 years. Let's go with 20 years. Like, if you are a fan of basketball, inside the NBA has been a part of your basketball story and journey. They gave them some signed all-star jerseys and championship rings, but it was so gimmicky and it felt forced, and it just felt like nobody really enjoyed it, and Kevin Hart couldn't take it seriously. And honestly, it was sad for the game. And then you had Mr. Beast come in and essentially filming a YouTube video that took way too long. During the game, you saw, or during the event, I guess you could say, you saw the players kind of rolling their eyes and just like, man, can we get back to basketball? But the NBA had already planned all these gimmicks that took just way too long. And I don't understand why they committed to that so hard. Even when, the TNT crew got their gifts, they felt the need to give Kevin Hart an MVP trophy or the somewhat MVP trophy or something like that. It was just it was unfortunately weird that Kevin Hart was the main character of NBA All-Star Weekend. And he's talked about wanting to be in the room with Chris Rock, Eddie Murphy, and all those guys, which I know there's a lot of hate for Kevin Hart. I'm one of the people that is and was a fan of him, but he's at this point of his career where he needs to transition away from being the main character and the short guy gimmicky guy joke all the time, and just a funny guy that can show up, add some commentary to things, but not make it all about him. That's what he should have done. Um, during the game, they had the TNT crew with the mics like talking about the players during the game, which honestly could have been cool, except all they did was complain. And Kevin Hart was just like, if you're a big man shooting a three, go to the bench. And he just kept saying that over and over and over and over. It made it weird. Another issue I had that I didn't realize I had was what agreeing with Draymond, which I don't do very often, but he mentioned that, you know, the NBA All-Star court, you have to earn the right to play on it. You have to be an All-Star. By bringing in these rising stars, they didn't earn the right to play on that court, right? But they were taking time away from the actual All-Stars playing. So some of these guys that were losing their games, they didn't get to play because, well, the rising stars are playing on that court that they didn't earn the right to be on. And he was mad about it. And then Reggie Miller was commentating at one point. And he's like, well, since these guys aren't technically all stars, and Kenny the Jet Smith corrected him and was like, no, they're not technically not all stars. They're just flat out not all stars. And they tried complain. They kind of started going back and forth. But in the end, it just made it weird because, yes, these rising stars technically should not be playing on the court. But to Charles Barkley's point, the reason why they're even there is because the players chose to not care for so long that the league felt like it needed to do something to spice up the game. In the end, you just had an awkward kind of basketball, but really a sideshow gimmicky thing for 3 hours that just drug on and on and on and on. And then for the send off for the Inside the NBA TNT crew, that should have been a nice, heartfelt moment. It was turned into a joke. They had them do the gone fishing gimmick where Kevin Hart brought them out fishing poles and fishing hats and life vests and made them put it on. And you saw the players kind of just sitting there rolling their eyes. Like this was in between games. I think you had 45 minutes, it felt like, in between some of the games, in the halftime of the games. And you see the players in the background just rolling their eyes, wanting to get back to hooping. At the end of the game, before they give out the MVP, they had the gimmick where they gave Kevin Hart his little trophy and all like, and you see the players in the background kind of just being like, what are we doing here? All of that to say, we can blame a lot of what has happened to the NBA All-Star game on the players. Not arguing that at all. You not caring is what got us here. But Adam Silver and the league, who has kind of gone on the media circuit talking about how the players ruined it and they need to bring it back, are, you can't really go and say that when you are part of the problem. You hosted the event. We got a half hour of actual basketball and 2.5 hours of gimmicks. That is on you, Adam Silver. That is on you, NBA League. Don't go and blame the players and say we need to find a way to fix this because they don't care when you literally turned the game into a joke. And then as far as Draymond, like I said, I thought having the rising stars and the young players that weren't all stars as the competitors and the hungry ones that want to fight and win would add a level of competitiveness. I still think that's true. That's awesome. But what he said makes sense. You have to earn the right to play on the all-star court. Those guys did not. Those guys were not all-stars. Why were they on the all-star court, taking away from Victor Wembanyama and some of these other guys? Because if their team wins, Victor Wembanyama is out. So he said, players want to chase all-star records or go for all-star MVP. If you lose, your team's just out of it and you don't get to play. So you got, 7, 8 minutes of basketball, and now you're done for the night, and now you're watching a 21-year-old that whose team won that isn't actually an all-star gets to advance into all-star weekend. I thought it just was a mess. And the part that makes it the worst for the league is that the NHL during the exact same weekend had their four nation face-off, and it was incredible. The USA versus Canada game on Saturday night, masterpiece, masterpiece. And that kind of took place of their all-star game. So you have hockey having just an amazing event, and then the NBA having a sideshow joke of an event. Essentially, at the same time during the same weekend, it just makes the NBA look even worse in that regard. So, in conclusion, too many things happened that were avoidable, and that is the league's fault and not the players' fault. Last year, I think the commissioner met with the NBA Players Union, and they talked about how getting focused to take the game seriously was tough when you have like a concert where you introduce the players with a band or a rapper or whatever. This year was a jazz band, and that takes 20, 30 minutes. Then they have to tear the stage down and do all this other stuff. Then you reintroduce the players, and then you start playing the game. They're like, we've warmed up, now we've cooled down, and then getting the game going. It's like, we can't lock in like that. If you want us to take the game seriously, treat it more like a real game. The commissioners said that that was a good point, and they'd look into it. And then they had a 20-minute jazz intro for the players, and it was a long time in between the game actually starting. So while the commissioner said all of the right things, he still made it a spectacle and less about basketball, which I think when people complain about, well, in the old All-Star games, they took it seriously. Respectfully, yes and no. They took it more seriously than they do now, for sure. But I challenge you to actually go watch those old All-Star games. It was rare that the guys really, really locked in the way that you were convinced they actually did. Now, they did it more than they do now, not even debating that, but it's not as good as you remember. But that was also back when they were able to focus on just hooping before the league turned it into a spectacle. So, if you take anything away from my long rant about NBA All-Star Weekend, yes, the players are still at fault, but it's time that we start pointing the finger at the league, who likes to play like they're on the side of the fans while simultaneously adding in all of the filler that makes the All-Star weekend a joke. Rather than just blaming the players, we can blame the players and the commissioner in the league. That's pretty much all I got. Honestly, I wish I could say I enjoyed it more. Didn't really even talk about the slam dunk contest or the three-point contest or the skills challenge. Uh, to sum up that, Chris Paul cheated the skills challenge and didn't take it seriously. He was going for time. So when he had to shoot threes, he convinced Victor Wembanyama and himself to just throw the ball and sprint through the skills course, making a mockery of the skills challenge. The three-point contest was good. It was fine. You can't really cheat that. And then the dunk contest has been dead for years, except for a few bumps here and there. Mac McClung might be one of the greatest dunkers of all time, but he's not even on an NBA contract. He's in the G League, right? Um, I don't really blame the players for the dunk contest being dead because honestly, there's only so much you can do. We talk about Vince Carter, Michael Jordan, Kobe, and all those guys that did the dunk contest. Imagination and creativity was so new at that time in regards to dunking that it felt like they were unlocking new things. There's only so much you can do now without props. Like, I'll be honest with you, Mac McClung's dunk was awesome when he jumped over the car, like Blake Griffin, but Mac McClung jumped over the taller part of it, which was awesome. But when I saw the car being wheeled onto the court, I rolled my eyes. Um, you need props in order to make the slam dunk contest fun. And I think a lot of players are just like, I don't feel like doing that. So the whole situation is tough. They need to go back to the lab and try again. But the tournament style for this weekend, it didn't work. And I truly believe part of that is because the league stuck their hand too much into it and allowed Kevin Hart to take over. So that's all I got. Gonna get this one uploaded, throw it online, pull some clips so you guys can debate it. We can keep this conversation going. Thanks, guys.